Hello there and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another video from the vault. That's right, I have another Patreon exclusive video to share with you all today, so thank you so much to my patrons for allowing me a little bit of extra time behind the scenes to get more of my ducks in a row, as it were. But today I'll be going over a couple of more advanced practice problem designs from the book Modern Pattern Design, and I always do recommend this book. It is one of my favorite drafting books, so if you ever see it floating around online or in person, I highly recommend picking it up, especially, of course, if you are interested in vintage design. There is actually a slightly cut-up digital version floating around on the internet as well, so I will link that for you below. But both of these designs are rather fun, so I'll go ahead and let past me take it away. Alright, here we are with a piece of alphanumeric paper and my basic block pattern. As usual, of course, and today I'm going to go ahead and trace a full front here to start off with for our first design. So I'm just flipping that along the center front and tracing a full front, both sides, left and right, and I'm tracing on my darts here and my apex, of course, most importantly because we are going to need that apex to manipulate the fullness around the bust, of course. Now, this pattern demonstration here, or this example pattern from this book, Modern Pattern Design, shows this like striped separated design with a little bit of gathering at the shoulder, and the stripes do pass through the apex on either side, so that's how the style lines are created and the darts are eliminated. And this block that they're using only has side darts and does not have waist darts. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is extend all my dart points up to the apex and close my waist darts into the side darts to create giant side darts and eliminate those waist darts. So we'll do that first, but here I am cutting everything out before we get properly started here. And I will go ahead and recreate this little design for you. I will link to the page, or I'll put the page number in the book for this below so that you can find this same illustration. There are not instructions for this, so you just have to kind of look at the illustrations and guess. So that's what I'm about to do here. But I will go ahead and cut up from the waist darts, down from the side darts to the apex, and close these waist darts and move all that fullness up into the side darts. So now the side darts have suddenly doubled in size. And I will redraw the dart legs on the side here because we aren't going to eliminate these darts entirely, but I just wanted to start with a block that looked more similar to the starting one that they had as well. So now we have giant side darts instead of any waist darts, like so. So again, we're going to separate this off into these kind of curvy stripes. So you can see the drawing here up in the right hand corner of what these look like. They are kind of wavy, these stripes, and it's funny because you draw them a little bit curved and they look straight on the body because the body, of course, is curved. So it's all optical illusions, really. Basically, I'm drawing the main curve down the center of this first, and I'm making sure it's like the same width apart all the way along. I do believe mine is 4 inches? 5 inches. 5 inches apart? I don't remember. Well, I feel bad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It depends on the size of your pattern, how far apart these lines will need to be anyway. But basically, one line curves through the apex on the right-hand side, one line curves through the apex on the other side, and then to find the middle stripe, I just found the center of this big one. This does not need to be mathematically perfect, necessarily. I mean, you can, but you know, I'm on the more slapdash side of things, aren't I? So, I think good enough will do. I think in the end it is 2 inches for each stripe, so it must be 4 inches in that middle area. But again, it's not that important. Anyway, we're creating a style line here and eliminating this dart, so I'm going to make this curved line swing up into the top of the dart area here, and you'll see how that ends up for me in the end. But we're just drawing our stripes across here. You can draw, anything you want on a pattern and separate it, but if the only way you can eliminate the darts like we're about to do is if you draw your lines or your sections through the apex. That way you can swing the darts somewhere or eliminate them in the style line. And then up here on the shoulder, we're just going to draw in 3 lines. You can see, I think they have 4 lines on their drawing up in the corner there. But we're just going to use those to add some fullness and gathering up into that shoulder area where there's a bit of gathering on our example pattern here. Our design 1 for today. I will have a second one for you. This one's actually quite simple. And you'll see the other one is much stranger. But here we are. We can start thinking about cutting this apart. I'm just going around on each stripe here and marking bias so that I know what grain line to cut this on later, because the book does recommend you cut this out on the bias. So we've separated our first little area here, and now we can go ahead and eliminate this dart entirely, like so. And so now you can see the dart fullness is kind of moved above here now that we've closed that dart. So the dart, a dart-ish shape still goes away, but we're no longer using it as a dart. It is now incorporated into the style lines of this bodice in general. I'm going to go ahead and draw some notches over these pieces so I know how to match them back up when it comes time to sew these things later, like so. And I did go ahead and number these pieces so you can see 0 through 4 here. And I'm going to cut off the dart, or close the dart on the other side, I guess, and cut off that dart fullness. And so now this other dart has been eliminated and incorporated into the style line. So you can see where those darts were if you start lining up the pieces. But now they are part of the style line instead. So the same fullness is eliminated, and the same like shaping is done as the darts would have done, but instead of darts doing it, the style lines will now. So I cut those lines open up here so we can add in our extra fullness for the gathering. I need a larger piece of paper here, like so. I'm just adding about an inch between each, or like an inch of fullness between each of these lines up here. Again, I have 3 lines, they had 4. Whatever, it'll be fine. You know, I'm kind of modifying this to work on my block. And like so. So this is essentially the pattern. However, of course, we've cut this pattern into many sections. And we have all these style lines now. We're going to need to add seam allowance to all of them, because anytime you cut the pattern apart, you're going to need to add seam allowance. Now the outside edges of my pattern, because it's a tracing of my block and my block does include seam allowance, already has seam allowance on it. But anywhere the pieces have been cut apart and they will need to be sewn back together, I will need seam allowance in order to do so. So I'm going to go ahead here, and all along all of these pieces along the center here, I need to add seam allowance. So that's what I'm about to do here now. I hope you were able to follow along with that nonsense that was just going on. You can always slow me down in the settings on YouTube here. You can listen to me sound a little bit more drunk if you slow down my voice, if you wanted to watch this in even slower speed. But this is like a good example project for more advanced dart elimination techniques here. You eliminate the darts when you do something like a princess seam line, of course. This is a little bit different from that. This is not a princess seam, this is a strange rainbow stripe diagonal seam situation. And it would be very fun to make a garment like this and do each of these sections in a different color. It's hard to understand why you would want to do something like this if you weren't going to be doing some color work or something to do with pattern or different textures maybe. Like for example, if you were to cut this out of silk charmeuse, say, the fabric that I keep mentioning that I've never used. But, or actually a silk crepe back satin would be nice. And you did some stripes in satin and some stripes in crepe. Or again, if you did these all in different rainbow colors, or if you did just color blocking every other stripe a different color, it could be fun. But this is all going to get sewn back together like so, and those darts that we eliminated are now part of the style lines and will be incorporated to create the fullness we need for the bust without actually having to sew any darts. Alright, so I have some muslin here, and we will go ahead and cut all this out. Again, you can kind of see here that these are tilted on here. It's because, again, I am cutting these out on the bias. So we had that original blue line for our center front down the first starting tracing, and that blue line is, you know, perpendicular, or like is like a good base to start off with when you understand where bias is. It's 45-degree angle of that line. So if you tilt that blue line onto the 45-degree angle, you can see I have it here of all these pieces, that center front line. You can see on piece 2 it's marked center front there. So that blue line is on the needs to be lined up with the bias, and then we will know that we're cutting everything out on the bias as the book recommended. Hopefully that makes any sense. I always think I'm confusing and people tell me I'm not, so that's nice of you. I'm sure a couple of people out there do find me confusing. It's too bad. But just cutting this all out of muslin. Of course, we only need a single layer here because we started with a full front, so we don't need 2 of everything, we just need 1 of everything. And I am going to go ahead and quickly trace a facing for both the front on each side here. So trace a facing for the fronts, and then I'll be putting a basic back, or my basic bodice back together for this as well. Just the block back is all I'm going to be using for this, just so that I'm able to try on this muslin and show you what it looks like. But I'm going to finish the neckline with the facing as well, just so that the neckline is nice and finished, so you can get an idea of what this would look like if you actually made it up. Of course, you would probably make it up in something nicer than this rather stiff muslin. This muslin is almost like a quilting cotton weight, maybe even a little bit heavier, so it's pretty stiff. And something like this would probably look nicer in, you know, rayon crepe or some kind of silk. But if you're making your muslins out of silk, that's true luxury right there. Making mock-ups out of silk, That's just wasteful, honestly. So we have some 100% cotton muslin here. And again, the nice thing about muslin is at least there's no dyeing or bleaching involved. This is unbleached muslin, so this is like the natural color of the cotton. So you've skipped a couple of processes that make textile manufacturing so troublesome. But here, I'll just stitch my facing together, set that by the machine, and cut out these backs to use as well. Sew the darts in the back. All that jazz. Real quick here, just so that I can pin this on and show you what it will look like. So I'll just mark my darts real fast, just with marker because it is just a muslin. And actually, with these muslins, I still have them that I make today. The muslins that you see me make today, I still have them. And I think I will take the backs off of them just to use for all future potential muslins, you know, where I just need a plain back like this, because now that I have a few cut, it would be silly to throw them away. Just start a muslin collection here. Anyway, so I have all my pieces cut out now, and I can start to figure out how these are going to go back together. This is why I numbered them, because you could see how it would be easy to kind of get turned around. Alright, this is all going to go back together like this. And you can start to understand why the notches are important, because I'm going to mark them with pins, and then I'm going to match those pins up to one another. So with piece 4 and 3 here are going to get sewn together first. And right where those notches are, that where those pieces need to match back up again, I'm going to go ahead and put pins into my fabric on both piece 4 and 3 here, so I can line these up properly. And like sewing a princess seam where you have convex and concaves going together, you have the same situation going on here. Usually where there's style lines with the darts illuminated, you have to end up sewing convex and concave curves together. But these ones are so subtle for most of it that it's not really a problem. You will see later on there is one that's a bit too curved, and I end up having to clip the seam allowance before I sew it, which is fine. It's possible to do. I just don't ever clip the seam allowance all the way down that full 1/2 inch until after the seam is sewn. But you can cut it like a 1/4 inch if you need to help things match up properly. But here with my notches marked, I need to sew this down to here. So right sides together, and I'll just line up those pins and match them up where they need to go. And start pinning all along the seam. And you see I use a lot of pins here. Again, that's just because at various points of this, I'm sewing different concave and convex curves together. And this like area here where you can see underneath my right hand where it's quite curved, that's like where the bust on this side will end up being. And I could have smoothed that out probably a little bit more. You'll see in the end that it's a little bit puckered right here. But that's because I was making a muslin, and let's be honest, I wasn't being the most perfect. If I was using an expensive silk, I would have gone slower. But with muslin, I don't treat it with the same level of respect, perhaps. But just pinning along here, making sure everything matches up. You'll see some kind of magic nonsense go on here once these strips, I mean, they just looks like ribbons that are like, 2.5 or 3 inches total with the seam allowance wide. But they create the like pocket or like the fullness for the bust, no problem. But here you can see this is a very curvy seam, so it needs to be clipped before it will lay flat. So I'm going to go ahead and clip. I'm clipping like every inch here, but you really want to clip like every 1/2 inch for it to lay the very smoothest. Clipping right down to that stitching line, and I will go ahead and press this and bring it back. Like so. Magic. The movie magic. But you can see there's fullness, there's room built into this now because of that sort of quote-unquote dart in the style lines that we closed. So there's room for the bust now. Now I can sew 2 down to 3 and 1 down to 2. But I did make the mistake of I didn't put notches between 1 and 2 here. So now I'm going to have to do that kind of in post pattern production, putting notches in. I can mark these ones on the bottom of 2, but I forgot to mark between 1 and 2 before I cut them apart. Always mark these sort of notches before you start cutting the pattern into sections. Otherwise you have to do this. And I don't think this should look like fun. It's just kind of confusing. But basically I'm trying to create notches backwards. Really, it's much easier to just draw the line first and then cut the pattern apart. Oops. Do forgive me. I'm just going to speed this up because it is boring. Anyway, now that I have notches that I can line up again, just do them before. Don't do what I did. Now I can match this up. I'll just put pins in here while it's waiting. Anyway, sew 2 down to 3 here. And again, just matching up where those need to be, which is why I have those pins in the first place. Just helps, especially when things are on the bias and they can stretch quite a bit if you accidentally, allow them to. I guess you could possibly put stay stitching in something like this. It's not really usually my jam, as we know. Go ahead and stitch along here, and then all along this side as well. Or stitch, pin, and then stitch. You know what I mean. But we can see, we're trying to create this design up here in the right-hand corner. And again, I think this would look really great color blocked, or like if you had a print in a solid, perhaps. But definitely the most fun would be to do it in like rainbow colors. That would be really fun. But it would be hard to know how much of each fabric you needed, because you need to cut those on the bias like that. You need basically like a half yard of each, and then hope for the best. Anyhow, now we have 4, 3, and 2 together. Time to stitch 1 on. Once again, I'm just making sure that my notches are marked with a pin. But you can see how much fullness is incorporated into this for the bust here. We have those bust darts, they're just no longer bust darts. The same amount of fullness is created and removed. The same amount of shaping that we need is here. So that's fun. It's kind of like magic. You start sewing these like straight strips together and they creates this body, or my body, shape. Now up here, where these wedges of fullness are at, I'm going to go ahead and put pins at the start and end of those so that I can gather this area down to create a little bit of gathering here along the, like underneath the neckline, between the neckline and the shoulder. So I'm going to put 2 lines of gathering stitching in here, just large basting length stitches over on my machine. I'm going to go ahead and tie one end of these off. I don't think you're supposed to do this, but I do it all the time. So I just tie off one side of my gathering. That way I don't have to worry about this side coming undone while I pull from the other side, like so. It is so much nicer to have 2 lines of gathering stitching too. If you're only ever, risking it by having 1 line of gathering stitching, it's so much nicer to have 2. Try it. It's worth the extra little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and space those gathers out a little bit here, and then I can start to pin this back down to our fun stripy bodice, which will be hard to see, the full detail of this in the end, because of course all these pieces of muslin are the same color. Less fun. But I need to sew this onto here. I went ahead and grabbed my pattern piece and just marked my seam allowance on this piece up here, just so I could see exactly where my neckline was supposed to be, because I was like, I don't want to get lost. So I'm just marking this real fast here, like so. And I can match this up to where I know it needs to be. Thanks for marking it on the other pattern piece again. You can mark your pattern pieces and put notches in a lot more places than I do, that's for sure. I needed to take out some of my gathering here. I got overzealous to make this fit down. I'm just going to go ahead and pin this into place, just like, the rest of my stripes, technically. Pin this down, make sure it fits, move the gathering around as need be, and then I will stitch it into place here along this seam line. Like so, and then I actually stitched my basic bodice block backs on here as well. Nothing fancy going on with those. They're just there to hold the shape of this so I can try it on. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this neckline with a little facing, just so we can get an idea of what this looks like all finished up. Well, sleeveless, of course. Of course, the little drawing here has sleeves, but I didn't need to mock up the sleeves because we didn't do anything with them. And here is what this looks like on a person. So here we go. Here I am. Hello. Sorry that the set is kind of messy behind me. But here I am. It's slightly blurry. It's hard to see that those stripes are there, but they are. You just saw me sew them, so you know they're there. But this fits just like my basic block does, which is the idea, So the fit shouldn't change too much, even when we do this much nonsense to affect the design or the style lines of this. But here is this just pinned on. It's just pinned closed in the back. But this is how this fits, and of course it would be much more fun in like stripy colors or color blocking. And time for design number 2. That one was the easy one, so hopefully you were able to see what was going on. This one, things start to get really funny looking. So up here in the right hand corner you can see, or I just made it larger, here this is the design for our second attempt at one of these Modern Pattern designs. And this one, this is all they gave us. So you have what it's supposed to look like when it's done, and this little drawing with all these lines drawn on it, and you're supposed to know how to get from A to B here. And that's why you have me. I'll show you how we get from A to B here. So I've never done anything like this before, but we're going to give it a shot. Once again, though, they didn't have waist darts in their starting block, so I'm going to close mine into the side again. So same starting step here. We have traced a full front, and I'm closing my waist darts because they didn't want me to have them, and fine, why not? I'll eliminate them from the get-go here. And I have some iced coffee, that's what that was. I needed a break. It's quite hot, you know. We're feeling the summer heat here in Colorado last week. It's been like 98 most of the time. Kind of crazy. Not inside, thankfully. My dad was actually out of town, so my mom and I cranked up the air conditioning because, you know, like all dads, my dad's not into having the air on even though it's a bajillion degrees. I keep telling him, whatever the extra cost is on the electricity bill, just let me know, and I'll give it to you, buddy. So the first step for this one is to draw the zigzag down the center. You can see the design up in the right-hand corner here, upper right-hand corner. There's this zigzag down the center front of this, and really it's just at a 45-degree angle to that blue center front line here. So all of these I'm drawing at a 90-degree angle to each other, but they're also crossing the center front at 45 degrees, like so. So I'm just trying to copy by eye the zigzag that they have on their version as best I can onto mine. So I'm just making it up, but also just referencing their image as best I can. And then I'm going to use this green marker to draw in all the dotted lines that they have on this little sample. So if you look up to the little drawing that they have here, they have all these dotted lines, and several of them are to add fullness and gathering, and then several of them are for moving the darts into new places. So some of these are new dart lines and some of them are gathering lines. Honestly, I should have used a different color marker so I could have delineated that more, but I'll talk about it here. So if you see the apex on the right-hand side of the screen, it opens up into those two little darts at the purple zigzag down the center. And then if you look at the apex on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see those three lines, again, going down into the zigzag center, and those will be three new darts. So we're closing the side darts on either side and opening them up into new darts that meet that center zigzag line. So, it's very irritating. I agree. This is a complex one. This is the finished design doesn't look that confusing, I think, but it is a lot to going on here. And once again, I'm marking the 45-degree angle from, again, the center line here as bias, because again, this needs to be cut out on the bias. And hopefully you know what I mean by that, because I've never really gone over that either. But it just means instead of cutting things lined up with a straight grain, you're lining it up with a bias. So I've drawn in all my lines. This is all I have to go off of here in the book. There's no instructions. Let's go ahead and see if we can't make something that looks like this finished illustration. It's interesting here because they don't show you what it looks like once the pattern is done. They just show you the block with the lines. So it ends up looking very strange, and I could see how that would give anyone anxiety, seeing what this looks like after you've done this, and thinking, is that really going to come out looking like it's supposed to? So I'll show you. So here we've separated it along the center zigzag here. And again, it's because we've cut the pattern apart, we are going to need to add seam allowance on either side of this zigzag. But first, let's go ahead and close this side dart on this side. We're going to work on one side at a time here. So for this first, right-hand side of the screen of the pattern here, we're going to go ahead and close this side dart, like so. So basically we just moved that side dart into two little short darts that meet up at that zigzag in the center. You can always move your darts into the center front if you want to. Of course, you have to have a center front seam then, I think. Pretty sure. But now we have our two little darts over here. So that's fine. That's easy enough. We've just closed the side dart and opened it up here. I'm going to use a larger piece of paper to fill in this stuff because as we go along and do this work along the center, I'm going to add that 1/2 inch of seam allowance that I need along our purple zigzag line. It's hard to tell that that line is purple here, unfortunately. It doesn't pick up too well on camera. Of course, I'm doing the best I can here with filming above the table in a basement. The basement part of that is the part that makes it not ideal because the ceilings are low, so I can't zoom out anymore, and it makes it hard to zoom in. We've all seen what my camera rig looks like, right? It's, as I say, back of the garage MDF and very cobbled together because I am no carpenter. But at least I can work out how pattern drafting is supposed to do. And that's all I can hope for, honestly. But I'm just adding my seam allowance along this, and I'm curving over this extra area that we added in, those new darts. Just curve those in. And so now I have seam allowance along the bottom part of my zigzag, and I have moved those darts from the side into the center. I'll cut off my excess seam allowance here, because we just need that 1/2 inch all along the zigzag where we cut the pattern apart originally. But we are about to really distort the zigzagness of it all. The lightning bolt down the center of this design is about to look very strange. So as we go along here, the next lines we hit, the next green lines we hit are these. These two, of course, truncate here in the armhole, and then along the center zigzag again, and we're going to add in some wedges of fullness here so that we can gather it back down. So we have gathering here, so we need to add in the space or the extra ease for that gathering. So I'm just adding in basically wedges of fullness here. I mean, technically these are darts. You could sew them as darts, but of course this design uses this fullness as gathering. So we shall do so as well. You could do a design similar to this as well and use and do it as pleats. Maybe you can do something like that sometime. It would be intense to do this as pleats that all meet up down the zigzag of a center like this. I've seen ones where it's pleats, but with a straight center front seam, not this zigzag situation. It's a bit strange, this zigzag. Of course, you would have to do this in a lighter weight fabric, by the way. If you were to do this design, I would recommend, if you're doing a cotton, to use something lightweight like a voile or cotton lawn. Nothing really heavier than that. Maybe a cotton organdy, if you didn't mind it being kind of sheer. Of course, you have the center zigzag seam to deal with, so figuring out how to finish that in a sheer fabric would be kind of annoying. So I would use something opaque, but I wouldn't use anything even past a lawn. Like even a poplin, I think would be too stiff for this. And then something floopy would work even better. So like a rayon challis or a rayon crepe, or even a lightweight rayon twill would work for this. And then lots of the floopier silks like charmeuse, crepe, or like a Georgette even probably would be fine with this. A little bit sheer, but not too bad. A crepe de chine would definitely work. That's floopy enough. But here I've added in more wedges of fullness. Just filled that in with extra paper, and I'm adding that seam allowance. You can see I'm still adding that 1/2 inch up along the center zigzag here. This is kind of advanced for following along, I suppose. So if you're following along with this and you are understanding where everything's going and why it's going there, then consider yourself pretty advanced with pattern making, honestly. This is the first time I've ever tried anything like this, so I feel kind of lucky that it worked out. Spoiler alert, it worked out. But here I am adding in, again, wedges of fullness up here. It's kind of like down on the lower half of this bodice, we have those darts, and so we can use that dart fullness to make the gathering. But up here at the top, we didn't have darts, so we needed to add those wedges of fullness in to create gathers where we wanted them. So now this pattern piece looks wackadoodle as all hell, but all this is going to gather down into this zigzag. All this is going to gather down into the zigzag. You can start to understand what's going to happen here. But this side is done, so now we can work on the other side. Set that aside for now. And once again, on this side, I'm going to start by moving that side dart into these like 3 darts down here instead. So again, if you look at the diagram that they've given us to work with, that Modern Pattern Design has given us, you can see there's these 3 little darts here into the center front zigzag instead of into the side. So I'm going to go ahead and close my side dart, although I start having trouble because these guys start wanting to separate. I've cut them so that they will hinge, but then it doesn't want to hinge, and so you can see. This is why I always say cut up to the apex, but not all the way through, so that you can have these in the correct position. Because mine, now they're loose, and who knows what's going on with them. But this is how it was. Check. This is how it was. Now I can close my side dart, and then I split that fullness amongst these 3 darts here in the center. And again, we're going to use that dart fullness as gathering instead of as darts. Why did I choose such complex designs? Today's video is a bit advanced. I apologize. Once again, I really hope you are following along. Anyway, I've cut too much paper away and not left myself enough stuff. But anyway, I'm just splitting the fullness that we've moved over here between these openings. And I'll tape everything down, honestly. But we've eliminated the side dart and created these 3 darts along the center zigzag instead. My goodness. Lots of tape. Lots of scrap paper going on. This is why you always keep your pieces of scrap paper. I keep a bucket of them actually next to this table. A lot of times in these videos you'll watch me like throw paper or like sweep it off the blue table of doom, and I collect it from the floor after my mayhem and put it in a bucket, and then whenever I need a little piece of scrap paper I just grab it out of the bucket. As much recycling as I can do down here when it comes to this paper. Although I do need to order a new roll of paper soon probably. We're getting kind of low. Anyway, I'm just adding on my 1/2 inch of seam allowance along this part that we just moved those darts into. Again, we're still going to need seam allowance along the area. All along the zigzag. It might be easier and more understandable to add the seam allowance to that zigzag when you first cut it apart. That might be easier for some people to like visually see what needs to happen. I apologize that I didn't think of that until I was editing this video. But now we've moved that side dart closed, and I can cut away this extra side dart fullness. Bloop. Goodbye. And so we've moved that side dart. It's closed now, and we've moved it into the zigzag. Alas. All right. Up here. This is all, well, here. Tape this down. But up here we need to add seam allowance. So let's go ahead and do that. Luckily this part of the zigzag will stay as it is. Like so. Just add a 1/2 inch. I'm looking to see which side of my marker I have here. It has a thin side and a large side. And up here, cut this off. Just add our seam allowance where it needs to be, like so. And we'll just add this on for the rest of it too. Why not, while we're here? Before I add in the wedges of fullness up into this shoulder, because you can see on the little drawing in the right hand side, there is gathering coming down from the shoulder. Well, there's not gathering at the shoulder, but there's gathering emanating from the shoulder into the center on both sides of this. So I will cut these lines up to the shoulder, but of course not through it, so I can hinge these open. We just saw why that's important a moment ago. Like so. This little seam allowance wasn't properly taped. Stay where I said, you know. You can see also why it was good to mark the grain lines, the bias lines, onto this before you start doing all this manipulation, because it would be hard to figure out where it was supposed to be afterwards. Because this pattern turns out to be a very strange shape. But let's go ahead and start filling in these. Grab a bigger piece of paper here. And I'm just going to separate these. I realize I haven't been talking about this much. Anytime I just add in wedges of fullness like this, add in these extra darts, I never add in more than like 1.5 inches. So up here I'm only adding in like 1 inch. Because, again, I don't like a ton of gathering. And your fabric, the more gathering you add, the thinner your fabric has to be to accommodate all of that gathering. So just add in a little bit of extra fullness. It's not for fit, it's just for style lines. So you're just, you know, adding the gathering for the look of it, not for any other particular reason. So there's no need to add more than enough, I suppose. And again, I've already added seam allowance here, so I'll just connect this and curve this off, like so. And we can slice the excess away. This pattern is such a strange shape. Especially because, like, I haven't done this before. I've never seen what this is supposed to look like, so I'm thinking, wow, this, I hope this works, is what I'm thinking. Up here I do need a little bit of seam allowance. This is the top of the zigzag, actually, so this need to have seam allowance up here. Stumbling over my words. As I'm recording this, it's 11:11 at night, by the way, and I've been packing orders for Etsy all day, so I am a little bit exhausted, so I apologize for my brain malfunctioning. And my brain and my mouth not exactly talking to one another. But look at this pattern. What a nonsense shape. But again, this gathers all down into here. This gathers all down into here. That gathers down into here, and the other side into the neckline. So it will make sense in the end, I promise. This goes into here. This goes into here. This goes up there. All right, let's cut this out of muslin, and we can actually see what it looks like. You'll be surprised how well it comes together, or how quickly it comes together. And again, we're going to cut that out on the bias. So let's go ahead and grab my muslin and cut these out. Again, we only need one of each. And if I were to line these, I would just use my regular bodice block cut on the bias probably. But again, all this gets gathered down to here. All this gets gathered down to here. And it starts to look like a bodice again. Here. And here. So we have a lot of gathering stitching to go put in this. Let's see. Along here I need 2 lines of gathering stitching. Along here I need my 2 lines of gathering. Here I need 2 lines of gathering, and here. So all the curved kind of areas I need gathering. So let's go put those in and come back like so. So now I'm gathering in. I am again just going to tie off one side of the gathering. That way I can not have to worry about it as I go along here and add this in. I'm just going to gather this down until it fits into its allocated spot on the other side, basically. So just tying this off so that it doesn't get in my way. There's a lot of thread going on here. Which, I mean, at least I use black thread for this, so you can kind of almost see. But I'm just making sure this fits down into here, and once I have it the right length, I'm going to tie my gathering thread into a bow down here, so I can move it if I need to, but once it's about right, I'm just going to move my gathering along, and I'll go to the next section and prep this next section, just move my gathering along till it's the right length, tie off my threads in a bow until I get to them later. I just wanted to see if this was going to work, you know? So I'm guessing, okay, this goes to here. That's about how long it needs to be. I will tie these in a bow for now, like so. Move those gatherings along, move that gathering along. Because you don't want your gathering to be all bunched up like on one length of this. It's good to space the gathers out over the entire area and kind of zhuzh them along. And again, I'm doing that up here, just going along each section at a time, making sure that nothing has gone disastrously wrong, honestly. Like so. And then this last side, I'll go ahead and again tie off one side and gather it down. Like so. I like to move all the thread to the top or the bottom or whatever I'm working on. One side, I suppose, and then tie them off on one end. Cut the extra thread away. I don't like having extra thread in my way, so again, size this down so it will fit. Tie the other end of the bow because we do need some adjustability here somewhere. And just tying them off in a bow for now while I work on the rest worked fine, actually. Alright, so now we can really see how this is going to fit together, and we can start stitching it together. So work down here, again, just move my gathers along and just pin this in place. Again, keep in mind your seam allowance at the point of that zigzag, you need to have a 1/2 inch overlapping the end of where it's cut. Just, I don't know, I guess try and keep in mind what seam allowance you need along this zigzag down the center. So just gone and stitched that, and now that first point of the zigzag gathering is in place. You are going to have to clip this corner here to be able to maneuver the next section into place. Just make sure this corner gets sewn, if you know what I mean, that your next line of stitching meets up with the first one, because of course you don't want little holes at the points of your gathers, and you will have to clip those points, you know, clip your points. It's just as important as clipping your curves in life. Again, I'm just moving my gathering along. I don't know why I'm being so good about it, seeing as this is just a muslin, but I don't know, I guess I was feeling all or nothing this day. Might as well do my diligence. Space out my gathers. Stitch that, bring it back. So fast when I'm doing it here with the movie magic. Alright, so we have our first 2 sides together. Again, clip that interior corner especially, so that this can lay smoothly for the next section. Again, pin it into place. I think it's easy to go from the bottom up like this, along this zigzag. I was really worried about sewing this, but it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I was like, oh no, is that going to be terrible? I don't often sew points to inverse points, I guess, so I was like, oh, I don't know. But it was fine, so no problem. Again, cut off some of my extra thread here. Yuck. Too much thread. Alright. Like so. We're getting there, we're getting there. This last little one up here again. Cut that corner so we can meet it up. And I had to resize this gathering just a little bit, so it was a good thing I had only tied it in a bow. You'll notice with this that the thickness of the muslin really is not great with this design. It would look so much better in like a round challis or something. But, alas, we are only just testing this design today. I did have a thinner muslin around. I should have used the lighter weight muslin for this, honestly, because this muslin is quite stiff. I think it has some sizing or something in it because it's quite thick. But anyway, here is our front. Woohoo! And I can go ahead and sew on backs again, and then sew on a facing again, so you can see what this will look like. But it actually came together surprisingly well. From those weird pattern pieces, it ended up looking like our little sketch here. And again, I didn't bother to sew sleeves onto this. I should have just cut out some sleeves to put on both of these, but alas. didn't want to waste the muslin. You can see what it looks like here. All put together, and I'll go ahead and sew on a facing and show you what this one looks like pinned onto my body as well. And here it is. Here I am. You can see what the backdrop looks like when I'm not like editing the spacing, I suppose. Anyway, here's what this looks like pinned on with that zigzag of gathering down the center. Looks a little bit like your bodice got hit by lightning, you know? But again, see where it's like a little bit puffy here? It would lay a lot smoother and nicer in a less stiff fabric. So we need something floopier, but it technically does work and does fit. So that's a nice surprise. And I was having a good hair day this day, so that's always important. I hope you enjoyed this dive into some pattern drafting experimentation today, and thank you again to my patrons for allowing me to share this video with everyone. And of course, thank you as always for watching. I'll be back with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye!